Say it again, slower this time. Not as a consolation prize, not as the thing people say to make you feel better that you accept politely while privately believing the opposite. Say it as a fact, the kind with weight and evidence, and the specific, unsentimentally earned quality of a conclusion arrived at through honest examination, rather than desperate self-reassurance. The avoidant is the loser, not you, and not because they are a bad person, not because loving avoidantly disqualifies someone from being worth grieving, or worth the love that was given, or worth the complexity of the full human being they are. The accounting here is not moral. It is practical. It is the clear-eyed assessment of what each person walked away from the dynamic carrying, what was gained, what was lost, what was left behind by whom. And the conclusion is not ambiguous when examined without the distortion of self-blame. You are not the one who lost the most in this. You are not the one who lost it all in the way that ultimately matters. Let that land somewhere it has not been allowed to land before. Here is what the avoidant lost, specifically. In concrete terms that do not require sentiment or exaggeration to be staggering. They lost you. Not the idea of you, not the romantic abstraction of a person who cared about them, but the actual, specific, irreplaceable you. The person with your particular interior, your specific way of seeing things. The quality of attention you bring that is not a general category of attentiveness, but a specific instrument, calibrated by everything you are and have been and have survived, that does not exist in duplicate anywhere in the world. They lost the version of being loved that you specifically offer, which is, and this is not flattery, this is the observation of someone who has read the full texture of what you brought to this dynamic. Extraordinary. Because you loved honestly. You loved without the agenda of management or the distortion of neediness masquerading as love. You loved with the specific, generous, clear-eyed quality of someone who saw the person in front of them and chose them anyway. Chose them knowing the complications. Chose them through the distance. Chose them in the specific, daily, unremarkable, and therefore most genuine way, by continuing to show up. That quality of love is not common. The avoidant encountered it and managed it like a threat. And now it is gone. What replaced it is the life on the other side of the pattern, the self-sufficiency that was supposed to feel like freedom, and does for a while, and then reveals its actual contents, which are quiet, which are competent, which are everything the architecture was built to protect, and nothing the architecture could never provide. The warmth, the specific knowing, the particular experience of being loved by you, gone. That is what they lost. Now what you lost, which deserves equal honesty. You lost the version of them you believed existed beneath the management, the person who surfaced in the best moments, warm, perceptive, genuinely there in the specific way that made the rest of it feel worth enduring. That person is real. The loss of access to them is real. The grief of watching someone be, in fragments, exactly what you needed, and then withdraw that version before it could be fully inhabited. That grief is legitimate and large, and not to be minimized. You also lost time, the specific, unreturnable resource of your time and energy and emotional investment directed toward a dynamic that could not hold what you were putting into it. This is a real loss, possibly the most practically significant one. And you lost the version of yourself that was compressed inside the dynamic. The parts of you that went quiet while your primary occupation was managing the relationship's temperature. The desires that got redirected. The reaching toward your own life that was perpetually delayed by the occupation of reaching toward someone who kept moving the target. Those are real losses. They deserve to be grieved. And here is the difference. Your losses are recoverable. Theirs is not. The grief you carry is the grief of an experience that ended, of time that cannot be returned, of the specific person they could have been to you that they were not, in the sustained and reliable way you deserved, able to be. But you are still here, still capable of everything you brought to that relationship, still carrying the full, extraordinary, irreplaceable interior that you offered to someone who could not receive it. The capacity did not go with them. The love did not leave with the relationship. The specific quality of how you show up for people, attentive, genuine, deeply feeling, willing to stay in the difficulty rather than exit at the first sign of complexity, none of that was consumed by the dynamic. It is all still here, in you, available for the next place it finds a context worthy of it. The avoidant does not have an equivalent consolation. What they are carrying forward is not capacity that was temporarily misdirected. It is an architecture that, unless examined and worked on with the specific intention of changing it, will produce the same outcome in the next significant connection. Will encounter the next person who loves genuinely and manage that love as a threat. Will feel the warmth of being truly seen and create distance from the very seeing. Will lose again, not because they are bad, because the pattern does not interrupt itself. There is a specific cruelty in the avoidance position that is rarely named with sufficient clarity. They got to experience you. They got the warmth you brought, the quality of your attention when it was fully present, the specific experience of being loved by someone who actually saw them, not the curated surface, not the managed presentation, the actual interior, and continued choosing. They got the evidence, in the texture of daily life with you, that what they feared most about intimacy was not inevitable. That closeness did not have to produce the devastation the architecture was built to prevent. That a person could know them and stay. They got all of that. And then, through the operation of the pattern, they caused it to end. They carry the memory of what you provided. They carry the specific, aching, management-resistant knowledge of what they had. The fragments that keep surfacing in unguarded moments. The particular absence that the deactivating strategies cannot fully neutralize. The slow, reluctant, eventually undeniable recognition, arriving in the quiet spaces between other things, of the specific quality of what they lost. They experience what they gave up every time the architecture prevents them from having the thing the architecture was, experienced with you, teaching them they could want. That is not freedom. That is the specific, ongoing cost of a pattern that destroys its own objects. You are not still paying that cost. You paid it while you were in the dynamic. You carried it through the grief. And now, or soon, on the other side of the grief that is still completing itself, you have the thing they do not. The chance to bring what you bring, somewhere it can be received. Something needs to be said about the self-blame, because it is probably still there in some form, however much intellectual clarity has been accumulated. The nagging, persistent, emotionally sourced conviction that if you had been different, less anxious, more patient, more avoidant yourself, more anything, the outcome would have been different. That your behaviour in the relationship contributed to the dynamic in ways that make you partially responsible for the loss. Here is what is true about that. You were not perfect in the relationship. No one is. The anxious response to avoidant withdrawal, the reaching, the monitoring, the sometimes escalating attempts to close the distance, is itself a pattern, and patterns leave marks on the dynamic they participate in. If you activated the avoidance defenses in moments where a different approach might have created less activation, that is worth understanding. Not as guilt, but as information, as part of what you carry forward into your own growth and your own next connection. But here is what is also true, and what the self-blame consistently obscures. Your pattern was a response. The avoidance pattern was the original condition. You did not arrive at the relationship with the hypervigilance and the monitoring and the reaching. You developed them in response to the specific, sustained experience of someone whose behaviour made monitoring feel necessary and whose withdrawal made reaching feel urgent. The anxious response to avoidant withdrawal is not a character flaw. It is a nervous system doing exactly what nervous systems do when they are placed in an environment of intermittent reward and inconsistent safety. You were a reasonable person responding to an unreasonable dynamic. The dynamic was not created by you. You adapted to it. The adaptation was imperfect, as adaptations under stress always are, and the imperfection is worth learning from, but it does not make you the loser. It makes you the person who was shaped by something, rather than the person who created the thing that shaped both of you. The reframing this script is offering is not the consolation prize version of events. It is not the story you tell yourself to feel better that you do not actually believe. It is the accurate account of what happened, examined without the distortion that grief and self-blame introduce. Grief distorts in a specific direction. It locates the problem in the person doing the grieving. It takes the experience of loss, of something ending that you wanted to continue, and reverse engineers a logic in which the loss was deserved, in which the ending was the natural consequence of your inadequacy, in which the avoidance departure was a verdict rather than a pattern. This distortion is not your fault. It is what grief does, particularly grief experienced by people who are prone to self-examination, who care about accountability, who would rather locate the problem in themselves and fix it than locate it in the other person, and simply accept the conclusion that the loss was not their fault. You are probably that kind of person. The willingness to turn the examination inward rather than outward is one of your better qualities. It is also, in the specific context of recovering from an avoidant dynamic, one of the things that has been working against you. The examination that serves you here is not the examination of what you did wrong. It is the examination of the full, honest, accounting of both sides picture of what actually happened and what each person actually lost. And that examination, conducted without the distortion, reaches the same conclusion every time. You gave something rare. This is not hyperbole. The quality of love that persists through avoidant withdrawal, that continues showing up after repeated experiences of the warmth being met with distance, that retains its genuine quality rather than curdling into strategy or resentment, that keeps believing in the person beneath the architecture, even when the architecture is all that is being shown. This quality is not ordinary. It is not what most people manage to sustain in the face of what you sustained it in the face of. Most people, encountering the avoidant pattern in its fully activated form, either match the distance or exhaust themselves early. You did neither. You held something genuinely difficult in a genuinely complex way for longer and more honestly than most people manage. The depth of your engagement with the relationship, even the painful, monitoring, calibrating version of the engagement that the dynamic produced in you, is evidence of an extraordinary capacity for love. That capacity is yours. It did not belong to the relationship. It did not live in the specific dynamic that just ended. It lives in you, is produced by you, is an expression of something fundamental about how you were made and what you learned and who you became through all of it. The avoidant was the temporary recipient of something that is permanent in you, and the permanence of it in you is the reason the loss, however real, is not the final accounting of this story. Think about what you are carrying forward. You are carrying the knowledge of what genuine love feels like from the inside of giving it. The specific, embodied knowledge of having loved without holding back, which is, regardless of the outcome, one of the most significant things a human being can do. You know what it is to choose someone consistently in the face of their own unavailability. You know your own capacity in a way that safe, uncomplicated relationships rarely teach as clearly. You are carrying the clarity about what you need. The relational experiences that teach us most precisely what we require tend to be the ones in which what we required was most consistently absent. You know, with a specificity that people who have only been in functional relationships rarely develop, what genuine reciprocity feels like, what its absence feels like, and what you will no longer organize yourself around in order to maintain a connection that cannot offer it. You are carrying the growth that difficulty produces when it is processed honestly rather than suppressed. The person on the other side of this, who reflected on what happened, who stayed with the grief rather than bypassing it, who examined their own patterns alongside the avoidance without collapsing the distinction between them, that person is more specific than the person who entered the dynamic, more self-knowing, more precisely acquainted with their own interior. The avoidant is carrying the loss and the pattern. You are carrying everything else. There is a version of the future that belongs specifically to you that the avoidant does not have access to. In it, the quality of love you carry, which remained intact through everything the dynamic asked of it, finds a context in which it can actually land, not disappear into management, not be treated as a threat, not be calibrated against and rationed and received with the specific insufficiency of someone whose system is built to prevent full reception. Land, actually, completely, in the full and mutual way that love is supposed to work, when it arrives in a place where both people's systems can receive, rather than just one person's can give. That context exists. The person who can inhabit it exists. The specific future experience of offering what you offer and having it met without requiring you to chase or calibrate or manage yourself into something smaller. That experience is not closed off to you, is not the casualty of having loved someone who could not hold it. It is simply not yet. Not this person. Not this dynamic. Not the relationship that just demonstrated, through its ending, that it was not the right container for what you bring. The avoidant foreclosed one possibility. They did not foreclose the capacity that would have made that possibility real if the container had been right. That capacity is intact, completely, yours. The loser in this story is the person who had something irreplaceable and, through the compulsion of a pattern they did not choose and have not yet changed, lost it. That person is not you. You did not lose your capacity to love. You did not lose your ability to be known and to know someone. You did not lose the particular, valuable, hard-to-find quality of your presence in a relationship. You did not lose the future that the best version of love makes possible. You lost one person's ability to receive what you brought, which is a real loss, which hurts with a specificity that deserves its full time to be felt, and which is also, genuinely, without consolation prize softening, not the same thing as losing. The avoidant lost you. You lost a version of this relationship that was never quite available. Those are not equivalent losses. One of them is irrecoverable. One of them was never fully possessed to begin with. Guess which one is yours? You are not the one who will spend years in the quiet moments of ordinary life, encountering the specific absence of what you provided and finding nothing adequate to fill it. That is their experience, their inheritance from this. The specific, management-resistant, deactivation-proof knowledge of what genuine love felt like when it was present, and what genuine love costs when it is lost. You are the one who gets to bring what you bring somewhere else, to the next person, to the next connection, to the version of love that does not require you to make yourself small or calibrate yourself into invisibility, or reach perpetually toward someone who is perpetually moving back. You are the one who gets to be received, not the one who has to live with the memory of having failed to receive. The difference between those two futures is the difference between losing and not losing, and you are on the right side of it, even if it does not feel that way yet. Even if the grief is still loud enough to drown out the clarity. The clarity is there. It will get louder. And when it does, when the grief has completed enough of its work that the truth can be heard beneath it, what you will find is not the consolation prize version of what happened, the accurate one. You brought something extraordinary to someone who could not hold it. That is not your failure. That is their loss. Entirely, completely, irreversibly theirs.